Hi, this is Matt Steininger with the Longmont Observer, and today I am joined by Matt Kohler, who is a part of Red Fist Productions and a friend of mine for the past year and a half or so, right?
We're going on 2 years almost.
2 years almost. And he is doing Batman Master of Fear. It's a web series. But we end up talking about a lot of TV shows and movies, and you saw this a few weeks ago, and you've been like begging me to see it because you wanted to talk about it so bad. And I talked with the people at the Longmont Observer, and they were actually interested in our long form discussion as well as my normal review. Mm-hmm. So let's get on into it. And I gotta say, man, incredible, just so incredible. And one of the things I loved is, and you have to stay after the credits, because after the credits, they have a 30-minute documentary talking about, you know, how they restored the footage, you know, how they colorized it. Mm-hmm. I love the details of how they were dealing with frame rate.
Yeah.
Just because back then you had to do the physical cranking of the camera. And so a lot of the footage had different frame rates. Mm-hmm. Like they would have 10 frames a second or 13, 14, 18 frames a second, you know, and they had to get it to 24 frames a second. And they even showed comparisons of like if they had 1 minute or 1 frame too fast or 1 frame too slow, how it looked off. Mm-hmm. The detail of all of that.
Well, they had 600 hours of footage from World War I that they sifted
No,
through.
they had 100 hours of footage. They had 600 hours of audio.
Okay. So no matter what, a lot of stuff that they had to sift through. Mm-hmm. It is, I mean, I said this before. It was probably the most. It was the best experience I've ever had in a movie theater because I've never seen anything like it. Like, how many times when you go in a movie theater and it's like, okay, I've seen everything that has been on the screen. Mm-hmm. You know, I'm not old enough to have been when, you know, Star Wars came out or when, you know, there's certain movies where I saw that I was like, oh, wow, I've like never seen this before. But never before the entire audience went, oh.
Yeah.
Like that moment the lens went down. And it's just like.
Yeah. So they were showing the footage in the original ratio, which was like a 4:3. Mm-hmm. And then they were kind of slowly zooming in on it. And as they were doing that, the resolution was still staying the same, which that amazed me. But when they got to the full theater resolution,
all of a sudden this,
and then they didn't do it wasn't like stark, but they did a slow colorization that came in, and then you see the frame rate working, and oh my, yeah, I did the same thing. I was like, whoa.
It was literally like they put glasses on you when you saw it. It was incredible. And I love because at first, I'm not gonna lie, I started watching this. I'm like, this is a fucking ripoff. I'm like 20 minutes into this movie, and like I don't know what the poster was showing, but it's all black and white still. So I don't know and then all of a sudden that happened. Alfred Hitchcock, because Alfred Hitchcock said you bore your audience the first 30 minutes, and then like the most important thing happens in that, like at that point. And that's what it felt like. I was like not bored, but I was like, I don't see the point yet.
Right. Well, and the way they framed it in the movie was, in the beginning, they were talking about like how Britain had declared war against Germany. And then everyone was being recruited, and you go through some of the posters, and then they would have like the recruiting process and joining, and then some of the training, but they didn't colorize it and do everything else until they were in the trenches, basically. So I think that was a good moment to do that, because it like you're going, okay, this happened in the past. I can at least see what the original footage looked like and get a frame of reference. But then to like bring it into reality at the moment that they were in the worst part.
Mm-hmm. I wonder, they had to have done testing, because I think in Peter Jackson's mind, he was like, all right, I have to get the audience accustomed to that old footage before showing what we did. Because if you just do it like right out of the gate or 3 minutes in, people are not used to it. And it's just like, oh, it's just colored stuff. That's kind of cool. Right. But like this, it's like you're used to seeing that. So your eyes are getting really used to that old footage. And then all of a sudden it's like, boom. And you're like,
what? Yeah. It takes your breath away.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad they put that half an hour of behind the scenes after the credits, because you get to see how much work was put into that.
Yeah.
One of the amazing things that I enjoyed was they added Foley and tried to recreate the sounds, because a lot of the footage was silent.
Yep.
And so they had the New Zealand Army firing off guns, and they had microphones all over the field so you could get the feel of the explosions. And they even had professional lip readers come in and figure out what the soldiers were saying. But the amazing thing is, he said that they would even try and find out who the soldier was or what area they came from based off of their company they were in, so that they could even recreate the dialect of where they were born in England.
Which is crazy.
Yeah. The amount of detail was nuts.
I will say this. I was going to save this for later on, but I figured this is a great point for how much you're talking about the detail. It explains why Peter Jackson's like recent movies have not been great, because he seems the type of person when he wants to do something, he puts all of his effort into that project, because this is exactly everything that we're talking about is just what he did with Lord of the Rings. True. He put all that effort, all that Foley work into it to recreate. Like they just literally were clashing swords. They would go onto battlefields. They would get like all this stuff around it to create Lord of the Rings. Or it wasn't just like a movie experience. It's like, geez, it pretty much feels like I'm living it. Yeah. And that's exactly what they did with this. Like he put all of his effort into this. I mean,
yeah, like in Lord of the Rings, where they even like handmade all of the costumes and the pieces that go, the little details that you probably didn't even notice. They put in so much time on. And the same thing with this, where when they were doing the colorization, he had original uniforms from World War I, and they were trying to like match the colors, because it was really difficult, since it had like different shades of gray for the German and blue, and different shades of like green and yellow and brown for the British. And so just that kind of detail really showed in the movie.
And the fact that they put that in like, what do you say, 70 minutes of the movie's colored?
Yeah. Yeah, the movie itself is about an hour and a half.
Yeah, like an hour and a half.
Hour 45 minutes. About a half an hour or maybe 35 minutes of it is the black and white original footage, because they had a little bit at the end as well.
Mm-hmm. So the fact that like 70 minutes is colored is
crazy.
And they probably colored more. They colored more, and they they didn't put it in the movie. Like,
yeah, one of the things that they talked about is the original cut was 6 hours.
Yeah.
Because they had stories of the women that went to work and a few years later got the right to vote. That's an entire story on its own. You had the the other people a part of the British Empire at the time, like Indians, Malaysians, Chinese, that also fought in the war. And I would like to see those stories.
Yep.
And then, stories of the Americans, of course, that were involved. So the amount of footage he had, he could do a Ken Burns documentary, like a 3-part miniseries of 2 hours each. But I think it would be cool if he made individual films of those different stories. I would like to see, the Indians that were involved and what their experience was, and the women that had to go to work and work to the factories and put in their all.
Yeah.
To see that storyline. So
that's always been kind of the biggest thing, is that World War I is the least talked. Like once World War II happened, everyone forgot about World War I. It's like, because it's literally a story. It's the perfect story. I hate saying it that way, but in a lot of ways it is. You got your bad guy, you got your good guys. You have
it's clear cut.
Where like World War I is just like,
Yeah, in World War II, you have an evil focus. You have the Nazis, you have Hitler, you have Himmler. Like you have the axis of evil that you're fighting against. In World War I, you had an assassination, and then countries were starting to go against each other, and it built to a point where you had a world war. But there was no clear enemy in a way. Yeah. And even the soldiers, when they were fighting each other, they weren't mad at the other side.
Which I always love those parts.
Yeah.
Like in the documentary, they're like hanging out with them and talking with them, even if they're captured. And it's just like, I don't want to kill you. I was told to.
Well, and the conditions in the war were so bad that they were saying that even when the Germans were captured, they were relieved because their part is over.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't have to do this anymore. And so they were relieved, and you basically just tired down the opposite side is how the war ended, pretty much.
Which, by the way, that footage was disgusting. When they showed their boots being taken off.
Oh, yeah. And they did not hold back. Like,
no.
If you are queasy for violence, you may want to be prepared for this, but...
Well, you probably shouldn't go into a documentary about World War I where most of it is about people dying.
True. But they had footage of people just sitting around with bullet holes in their arm, or one guy that had a chunk of his tricep pulled off.
They showed dead bodies with maggots all over it.
Mm-hmm.
It was some very, very graphic stuff.
It's probably the most raw version of war that I've ever seen.
Well, I mean, I'm going to be honest. I've barely seen any documentaries on World War I. I know what happens. I know what started it. I know how it ended. But like to sit down and watch a documentary, maybe this one and maybe one other.
I've seen a couple, but again, it's kind of the PG or PG-13 version of the events, and they didn't get into the little nitty-gritty details. Like the detail of how they cooked something. Maybe they were boiling water for tea or cooking food or whatever. That they had to use really small sticks to set the fire because if they had smoke, then it gave away their position and they would get bombed. I never thought about that.
Yeah.
I never considered that, or how they went to the bathroom where they just had...
Oh, I never noticed that either. They just have that log.
Yeah, they just have a plank of wood and they sit over it next to each other in total view of everybody. And
that part was disgusting, where the log broke,
yeah.
And the guy went into all the poop.
Yeah, but I never considered that.
Mm-mm.
And so seeing that was eye-opening.
Mm-hmm.
You know, how they slept, where they would just kind of either sleep wherever they were or just kind of dig a hole in the side of the dirt and go to sleep there.
It was also really interesting seeing the two different sides of the trench fight. You had when they first got in, where it almost felt like a vacation, how they were talking about it. It's like, we're here, we're having fun.
We're excited.
And then like when the generals and everyone were like, it's a go time now. Everyone needs to be, and the part where they're like, pointing the guns at them, it's like, you're either going to get shot by them or you're going to get shot by us. Like, you better choose. You better run full force at them or you're going to get shot if you don't.
Yeah, and like that one scene where you had all of the guys sitting in that one the one area. It was on this kind of road, but they were about to storm an area.
Yep.
And pretty much all of them died.
Yep.
But you can see like terror, like pure fear on their faces because they know it's a suicide mission, but it's their duty. It's
crazy the footage that they got back then.
Yeah.
It's like, first of all, like, let's just think about that real quick, the footage. It's like, we both know the type of cameras that they had back then.
Yeah.
It's like the same stuff as like, how did like a bunch of history, like when like Germany bombed a bunch of like, pretty much old articles, old like pretty much just like libraries back in the 40s, and like most of them standed. Like we still have a lot of like recorded history from that. It's like the same thing. It's like when you try to think about it too hard, it's like, how did this footage survive? Like,
yeah,
it's because all those people are dying. How are not? Maybe they were not trying to hit the photographers. Maybe that was it. It's like,
well, I think the photographers and the filmmakers, they came into an area, got their footage, and then they left.
Yeah. And
so
also
I'm sure some of them died, but they were in and out. They weren't there.
Yeah, they weren't like literally on like as they're charging right behind them, like it was Vietnam.
Right, exactly.
But I will say, I mean, like, just seeing those two different sides of when they're first there and when, the final days when they're charging and when like it was go time, when it was more of the war of attrition stuff, it was very interesting seeing the two sides and just seeing how much more petrified they were and knowing that they probably weren't going to make it.
Yeah. I mean, the conditions were insane. Like I can't even imagine.
And obviously, the worst thing of it all was not even the war, was them returning. And that's the saddest thing.
Yeah, that was crazy how... Now, on one hand, I can see why. Because England was separated from the war. It happened in France and Germany. Like, it wasn't in England. They got to see some animated pictures, cartoons of what was going on, and it made it look kind of glorious. It was all propaganda. And so when the soldiers came back, the people that were in England didn't think it was that big a deal. And they basically ignored them. You know, and that they even didn't want to hire them for work. Like they even had signs, no service members should apply, which blows my mind.
Yeah, it's one of the hardest things because when you know that them being in the trenches is not the hardest part and them coming back, like some of them were pretty much like, I would have rather died in the trenches than suffer through this.
Yeah.
It's terrible. And the sad thing is it happened 50, 60 years later in Vietnam.
Yeah.
The exact same thing.
Yeah, when soldiers came back from World War II, they were celebrated.
They were literally superheroes.
But I think part of that is because it wasn't a war that happened somewhere else.
Yep.
Like in England, they were getting bombed on a regular basis, you know, with Blitzkrieg. And then you had, or with the, not Blitzkrieg, but where they were bombing London and a lot of the areas in England. Like it was close to home. We had Pearl Harbor.
Yep.
You know, so it was close to home. World War I wasn't close to home.
It's kind of like the same thing
else.
with like the Iraq War. Like, I don't know anyone who got upset at troops coming back from that. It's like, oh, you're in the Iraq Wars, because like everyone knew it's like, oh, 9/11, we all rallied around the troops, even though a lot of people after a year or two was like, let's pull them out. It was more of let's pull them out because we don't want any of our own to spill any more blood. Mm-hmm. And like, I don't really remember. You might, if like when they came back, we were like, no, like we don't want you to worry. It seems like we've gotten a lot better about that in recent years.
Yeah,
about when
I think in the 90s it changed. Early 2000s it really changed. But no, the 70s and 80s it was bad.
Yeah,
I mean that's why you had movies and books like First Blood, you know, and Rambo. Things like that. Another thing I found interesting was when they were filming that at the time that no one had seen a film camera and they didn't know what to do.
Yep.
They were only used to a photography where you had to stay still for 10 seconds. And so a lot of the people were kind of staying still. You know, they didn't, and you could, I think Peter Jackson said sometimes you could hear the cameraman going, move around, like do something, because they were all being still for whatever it was that was going on. It was so foreign, the concept.
Well, you could tell watching it, like they're all like smiling and like, what are we supposed to do?
Yeah, what am I supposed to do? I don't know. Let's swap hats.
They would look at the camera so much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and one of the things about colorization. Now, I agree with Peter Jackson that you should not colorize films. But that's because the director was using black and white as an artistic expression, and it was supposed to be filmed in black and white. Like they planned it that way.
Yeah.
But with this is war footage. There's no artistic direction. There's no, motivation behind black and white. And he said if you gave them a choice between a black and white camera or a color camera at the time, they would all choose a color camera. They're just there to document. Yeah,
it's like they're just picking up the events.
Right. So
I definitely agree.
Don't colorize old movies, but colorizing the war footage and what they did with it made it feel so real. Mm-hmm. It was surreal.
Well, it was so bizarre how when they expanded the footage, how it almost felt like it just kept going. Like when they would show troops walking, you like even though the point was here, the troops were still walking almost off what the original camera was, and you could still see them off the screen. It was baffling.
Yeah, I would like a longer documentary on how it was made.
I know.
I hope when it comes out on Blu-ray that they have more special features and expansion on what's going on. And I really do want him to make other movies using this footage that they had for different stories.
Either that or they just make a They Shall Not Grow Old, just like box set documentary type of thing. And it's just like all 3 movies or whatever in the box set.
Yeah, just because I want to see the original 6-hour cut that they had.
Well, yeah, I don't want the other stuff that they had go to waste. I will say, there is no way I could have sat in a movie theater for 6 hours watching a documentary about World War One.
No, that would be more of a mini series, like a Ken Burns thing.
But what there was, it was definitely a good feel. It's like, okay, like I know a decent amount of what's being shown, but a lot of it is either new, as in, wow, this is just like I've never seen this on the screen, or I've just never heard certain things about it. So it always kept my interest. It was never just like, it wasn't a one-trick pony.
No.
Where it's like, oh, look, we colorized it and did this. Woo, cool.
Yeah, and there was no... So they added Foley and did the lip syncing with kind of voice actors just to make the footage feel real. Mm-hmm. But the actual narration was not a narrator. It's not like David Attenborough talking about the war.
Yeah, it was just like
they had all of the audio from the 1960s and 70s that the museums and the archivers had recorded interviews of the people that were there. And one of the things that kind of surprised me was how nonchalant they talked about it.
I know. They were just so open about it.
Yeah. And they were like, hey, yeah, this is what it was like. Like, this is what we did. And this is how we went to the bathroom. And this is how they thought of they got so used to the situation that things became mundane, like just seeing dead bodies was almost mundane.
I will say this: the one group of people that was affected by it were like the people who were shooting the cannonballs off. Because I love that part where they're like, when they finally went to the battlefield to see the devastation that they did, they were not used to seeing the bodies, and they're like, "Wow, we did this. We did this." And my great uncle, he was in World War II, and he was a bombardier, and he was active all 4 years, and he would never talk about it because he knew he killed a lot of people, some civilians, some not. And he just would not talk about it all because he's like, I know what I did, and I don't want to think about the things that I did were wrong. And so I've kind of felt that with that stuff because it's like, wow, that's this similar situation because you don't know.
Well, it's another level of disconnect. You're at a distance, just like when they went home and they were not treated well when they went home because the war wasn't there. They didn't see it. They're disconnected from it all. They can't understand it.
Yep.
The people that were doing the cannons and the long distance missile or firing, they're disconnected. They know that they fired it. They know that it exploded, but they don't know what happened. Mm-hmm. But the people in the trenches, they see it firsthand. They know exactly what's going on. And you could have the same thing like in World War II. My grandpa was also in World War II, but he was the front lines all the way through France and into Austria. And like a quarter of his platoon died. Or only a quarter of his platoon survived. And he wouldn't talk about it. But when he died, we got his military records, and it's like wow, this thick, and it goes through like every week of where they were, who they captured, what towns they took, or bridges, or like what happened every week throughout the entire time, because he went through all of France, from the beaches all the way through France, and then was in Austria for a year after the war.
Dang.
Now he did say one story that I thought was funny. He said the front lines weren't a straight line. It curved around, I was over here, and about a mile of curvedness was the hot food line. And I wanted my hot food, but I knew by the time I got there, it wouldn't be hot anymore. So he went over the trench and walked a half a mile through enemy territory and then dropped in the trench to get to his hot food.
Okay.
And I'm like, Grandpa, you've been in war too long when hot food is more important than getting shot by the Germans. And he was like, I wanted my hot food. But that's the only story he would tell. He wouldn't talk about anything else that happened. And I think it's because, like, you know, a lot of his friends died and he was right there.
Mm-hmm.
Because apparently they swapped the front lines once a month with, like, the 101st Airborne and some other platoons.
Mm-hmm.
So if you ever watch Band of Brothers,
Yep.
my grandpa was doing the same thing only a month after or before.
Oh.
So like a month before, I guess you would say. Month after, whatever. But basically,
one of the two.
You watch Band of Brothers and then just think about when they went to go take their rest. My grandpa was doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Just at a different time. So, but I never really thought about World War I, except for when you're looking at the behind the scenes or talking about Tolkien from Lord of the Rings, that a lot of his ideas for Lord of the Rings came from his experiences in the trenches of World War I.
It's kind of interesting that the two best things that Jackson has done revolve around Tolkien, World War I. But also you could see at the very end of the documentary how much it mattered to him, because he said in memory of his, was it his dad?
No, it was his great grandfather.
Yes.
And his
I thought it was a grand.
Or maybe it was, his grandfather.
Because he's like 20.
His
years.
great uncle.
Yes.
And then also his partner, Fran Walsh, her grandfather.
Mm-hmm.
That were in World War I. So, yeah, it was one of the things that I'm upset about. Not really, kind of. I don't follow award shows. I don't like them. I think they're rigged. It's all political BS.
And the fact that this movie's not getting talked about at all is complete BS. Yeah,
that it's not even nominated for Best Documentary.
Yep. I know.
That is insane to me. I don't know what other documentaries came out this year that are better than that.
I don't know a documentary in the last 10 years that'd be better than this. This is one that sparked my interest, and the fact that I was like, I've never seen anything like this before.
Yeah. I was blown away. Maybe he didn't submit it to the Academy.
Maybe he just didn't care.
Yeah.
Because it honestly seems like he just did it for himself. Because
and the museum or the because they asked him to do it. It didn't seem like something he was worried about getting recognition for. It was more of I want to do this because I think it's good.
Yeah. And that might be the best reason to do it. And it showed, because was it Weta? Was it Weta Workshop that did it, or
no? It was a couple of them, but Plan 9 was one of the big ones that worked on it, and also the company that he owns, I can't remember the name of them, that did the colorization and the restoration of the footage. They did an amazing job, just truly amazing. Anyway, I think that's about it. Do you have anything else to say?
What would you give it?
Oh, an A.
Yeah. I mean, if we're doing pluses, an A+. I mean, it's the best documentary I've personally ever seen. I haven't seen a lot of an abundant amount. I've seen fiction movies, but this is definitely the best one. I would give it an A. I wouldn't give it an A+. I guess I would give it an A because it was very focused on a specific narrow point of the war.
Which
So more
is
personal.
it was more of a good thing and a bad thing in a way. Like, it was good that I got to see the small details of the experience of a British soldier.
Mm-hmm.
But there's so much more with World War I that I would also like to see. That's why I want him to make the other movies, to talk about the women's impact, talk about the Indians' impact and the Chinese impact and the Malaysian. Like, I want the Americans, even on Germany's side, what they were like. There's so much to do with it that it felt too focused in a way. But that's it. That's my only thing.
So it's more of a personal and not like, because, I mean, obviously we both know there's no way they could have put all of that in a 2-hour movie. And the reason why I'm giving it the grade it is one, they executed something I didn't think was ever going to happen. And how many times do you really get that shocked or surprised in a movie theater? You know, with twists and storylines, yes, but technology-wise,
no.
I mean, like, after the 2000s, you're like, everything's kind of been done. And then, like, when something like this happens, you just go like this out of your seat, like, I have to see this. Mm-hmm. And this is a movie that, if you get a chance, even if you hate documentaries, it's like something that you just have to see just to understand, like, what.
Yeah. I would highly suggest it to anybody. So let us know what you think of the movie. And if you haven't seen it, go watch it. Go watch it in the theater.
Yes, exactly. Go see it in the theaters. And if you, for some reason, like, I don't want to, at least watch a documentary on how they did it to understand what we're talking about. And, like, how much of a master.
It's one of those things. It's one of those things that you should experience in a theater. You need to experience it on a big screen with a great sound system.
Yeah, there's not many of those movies that exist throughout your lifetime, and this is one of them.
Yeah. Like, I will be sad when it's on Blu-ray and I won't be able to experience that again.
Exactly.
But if you can see it in the theater, absolutely go see it in the theater. It's showing at the Regal Cinemas here in Longmont, so they got 3 showings a day so far. You need to experience this in the theater. So links to all of Matt's stuff is in the description below, along with my stuff. You can check that out. Thank you for joining me. I'm Matt with the Longmont Observer, and I will see you on the next video.